January 11th, 1944, 11:17 a.m. 24,000 feet over Oschersleben, Germany. The air at that altitude doesn't feel like air at all. It's a physical thing, brutal, 45 degrees below zero, cold enough to freeze metal, cold enough to kill. Captain Nathaniel Garrison's gloved hand rested on the throttle of his P-51 Mustang, tail number 427851. The engine's roar filled the cockpit, a steady, mechanical heartbeat. Packard V16503, 1,290 horsepower, turning a four-blade propeller at 2,700 revolutions per minute. The mathematics of controlled violence. His fuel gauge read 68%, 226 gallons remaining in the internal tanks. At current consumption, that meant 29 minutes of flight time. Maybe 30 if he leaned the mixture and accepted the risk of engine damage. Below him, 60 B-17 Flying Fortresses droned west in tight formation. 600 men sealed inside aluminum tubes. Ball turret gunners curled into glass spheres barely large enough to contain a human body. Waist gunners standing at open windows where the wind screamed through at 180 miles per hour. Pilots gripping control yokes, watching fuel gauges tick down, listening to engine notes for any change in rhythm that might mean death. They called the formation Iron Cross. 60 heavy bombers carrying 12,500-pound bombs toward factories that made ball bearings for German tanks and aircraft. Strategic targets, high value, heavily defended. The radio crackled in Garrison's headset. "All escort fighters, this is Blue Lead, RTB on my mark. Repeat, return to base, acknowledge." Garrison pressed the transmit button. Blue 4, copy. 11 P-51 Mustangs banked west toward England, toward safety, toward fuel that would last the journey home. Garrison's hand stayed on the throttle. He didn't turn. Ahead, scattered across the pale winter sky, 26 dark shapes materialized through thin clouds. Messerschmitt Bf-109s, JG-26, Schlageter fighters, veterans, the kind of men who'd been killing Allied bombers since 1940. The numbers were simple, brutal. Physics didn't negotiate. The bombers needed 32 minutes to reach Allied fighter cover. Garrison's fuel would last 29 minutes, maximum. The gap wasn't negotiable. In 3 minutes, his engine would cough, sputter, die, and he would fall. But the German fighters were forming up now, not a chaotic swarm, disciplined elements, four-plane schwarms, attack patterns refined through years of combat. They weren't looking at Garrison's lone Mustang. They were looking past him, at 60 slow-moving bombers that couldn't run, couldn't hide, could only absorb punishment and hope enough men survived to bring the aircraft home. Garrison did the mathematics in his head. 26 fighters against 60 bombers. If each German pilot made one successful attack run, how many B-17s would fall? How many of those 600 men would watch the earth rush up to meet them? How many would burn? His left hand moved to the gun charging handles. 6 Browning M2 50 caliber machine guns, 1,880 rounds of ammunition, 313 rounds per gun. At a cyclic rate of 750 rounds per minute, that was 25 seconds of continuous fire. 25 seconds to stop an entire enemy squadron. The equation had no solution. The fuel wouldn't stretch, the odds wouldn't bend. But 36 hours earlier, Garrison had made a promise. January 9th, 1944, 2 days before. RAF Station, Debden, England, 18:30 hours. The officers' mess smelled like wet wool and tobacco smoke. 60 men crammed into a space designed for 40. The noise was constant. Laughter, arguments, the scrape of chairs on concrete floors. Someone had a deck of cards. Someone else was reading a letter from home for the 3rd time that week. Garrison sat in the corner, a cup of coffee going cold in front of him. He wasn't drinking it, just holding it, feeling the warmth bleed into his hands. "Ghost!" The voice belonged to Lieutenant Amos Blackwood, 30 years old, Garrison's wingman, his closest friend in the squadron. They'd flown 47 missions together, watched men die together, learned to stop counting together. Blackwood had 2 kids back in Virginia, 6 and 8 years old. He carried their photographs in his flight jacket, never showed them to anyone, never talked about them. But Garrison knew they were there. "Big one tomorrow," Blackwood said, dropping into the chair across from him. "They're all big. Oschersleben, deep penetration, furthest we've pushed the escorts." Garrison nodded. He'd seen the maps, the fuel calculations, the timing windows. It was ambitious, maybe too ambitious, the kind of mission that looked clean on paper and turned into chaos at 20,000 feet when the weather shifted or the Germans brought more fighters than intelligence predicted. "Think we'll make it back?" Blackwood asked. "We usually do." "Usually?" Blackwood's smile didn't reach his eyes. Not exactly comforting odds. Across the mess hall, 3 men in bomber crew jackets pushed through the door. They looked exhausted, the kind of exhaustion that went bone deep. 50 missions did that. Watching friends burn did that. Flying through flak so thick you could walk on it did that. The lead pilot spotted Garrison and walked over. Captain Clayton Vaughan, 35 years old, B-17 pilot. Aircraft name, Ironclad. 49 missions completed. 1 more and he'd rotate home. 1 more mission and the war would be over for him. "Garrison," Vaughan said. "Captain." Vaughan pulled out a chair without asking. The 2 men with him did the same. One was young, couldn't have been more than 19, baby face, wedding ring on his left hand. Sergeant Desmond Holloway, ball turret gunner. He'd been married 4 months. His wife was pregnant. Everyone knew because he'd told everyone, repeatedly, with photographs. The other man was older, 28, sharp features, dark eyes that had seen things nobody should have to see. Lieutenant Raphael Stern, navigator, Jewish. His family had been in Poland when the Germans came. He'd received 1 letter from them in 1940, nothing since. He knew what that meant. Everyone knew what that meant. "Long flight tomorrow," Vaughan said. "Furthest we've pushed into Germany." "So I heard." "Escorts turn back at checkpoint Delta." Garrison nodded. "Fuel constraints." "Yeah." Vaughan's jaw tightened. "Fuel constraints, which means we go in deep with you, and we come home alone." The mathematics of bomber operations. Escorts could only go so far. After that, the heavy aircraft pressed on alone, slower, less maneuverable, defended only by their own guns and the hope that German fighters would be too depleted or too cautious to press attacks. Hope wasn't a tactic, but sometimes it was all they had. "We'll get you as far as we can," Garrison said. "I know," Vaughan leaned forward. "I'm not asking for miracles. I'm just asking you to remember that we're not targets on a map. We're men. 600 men tomorrow, some of them kids." He glanced at Holloway. "Some of them got families waiting." Garrison met his eyes. "I'll be there tomorrow, Captain, as long as I can be." "Your word?" "My word." Vaughan stood, extended his hand. Garrison shook it. The bomber captain's grip was firm, calloused. The hands of a man who'd spent 1,000 hours wrestling control yokes and hoping his aircraft held together long enough to reach home. "Thank you," Vaughan said quietly. Then he was gone. Holloway and Stern followed, 3 men among hundreds, 3 lives among thousands. But Garrison watched them go and thought about promises, about the weight of words spoken in mess halls before missions that might kill everyone involved. Blackwood waited until they were out of earshot. "You can't save them all, Ghost." "I know." "We go to checkpoint Delta, then we turn back. Orders." "I know." "Ghost." Blackwood's voice dropped. "Don't do anything stupid." Garrison looked at his friend. "Would I?" "Yes." Blackwood stood. "Which is why I'm saying it. Don't be a hero. Heroes get statues. Dead heroes." He walked away before Garrison could respond. January 10th, 1944. 0630 hours. Flight line. The morning was cold. Not the killing cold of altitude, but cold enough to make breath visible. The airfield smelled like aviation fuel and oil, mechanical scents, the smell of war distilled into hydrocarbons and metal. Garrison's P-51 Mustang sat on the hardstand, tail number 427851, nickname painted on the nose, Silver Phantom. Not his choice. The ground crew had done it. He'd never asked them to remove it. The aircraft was beautiful in the way that weapons are beautiful. Sleek, purposeful, every line and curve designed for a single function: speed and lethality. 11 tons of aluminum and steel and explosive potential wrapped in silver paint. Sergeant Luther Kincaid stood beside the port wing. The crew chief, 42 years old, too old to fly, just old enough to keep other men's aircraft in the air. He'd been working on engines since before Garrison was born. He knew more about Packard Merlin engines than the engineers who designed them. "Morning, Captain," Kincaid said. "Luther. She's ready, fueled, armed, all 6 guns test-fired this morning." He paused.
"But we need to talk about gun number 3. Garrison looked at him.
"Problem?" "Hairline fracture in the receiver. Not visible. I only found it during the detail inspection." Kincaid wiped his hands on a rag. "I welded it, reinforced the mount. It'll hold. But I wouldn't trust it past 500 rounds. The stress of sustained firing at high G-loads." He shook his head. "It might seize, might jam. Can't predict." Garrison nodded slowly. "Can you replace it?" "Not in time for tomorrow's mission. Need to pull the entire gun assembly, realign the mount. We're talking 8 hours minimum." 8 hours. The mission briefing was in 2 hours, takeoff in 4. "So I fly with 5.5 guns, Garrison said. "You fly with 6. Just don't push that one too hard." Kincaid pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "I wrote down the gun position. Number 3. Right wing. Outboard. You'll feel it if it goes. Different vibration pattern." Garrison took the paper,
Unfolded it. Kincaid's handwriting was precise, almost mechanical.
The note said, "Gun number 3. Structural stress limit estimated 500 rounds. Recommend conservation." "Thanks, Luther. Bring her home, Captain. I don't want to rebuild her from scratch." "I'll do my best." Kincaid looked at him for a long moment. "You always do. That's what worries me."
Mission briefing, 800 hours.
The operations room was packed. 24 fighter pilots, 60 bomber crews. Maps covered the walls, photographs of targets, intelligence reports, weather forecasts. The collected information of a military machine trying to predict chaos. The operations officer stood at the front, Major Thomas Hendricks, veteran of North Africa, 200 combat missions. He'd seen what happened when missions went wrong, when planning met reality and reality won. "Gentlemen," Hendricks said. The room fell silent. "Today's target is Oschersleben, ball-bearing manufacturing facilities. Strategic priority, high value, heavily defended." He pulled back a curtain. A map appeared. Red lines traced the route. England to Germany, deep into enemy territory, further than they pushed before. 60 B-17s, 12 P-51 escorts. Rendezvous at 0645 over the Channel. Formation will proceed on heading 090 to checkpoint Alpha. He traced the route with a pointer.
"From Alpha to Bravo, expect light fighter resistance. Scattered units, nothing coordinated."
The pointer moved. "Bravo to Charlie. This is where it gets interesting. Intelligence reports JG-26 operating in this sector. Veteran unit, experienced pilots, average kill count 30 plus per pilot." Someone in the back whistled. Hendricks ignored it. "Charlie to Delta. Maximum escort range. Fuel constraints require all fighters RTB at Delta. No exceptions. Bombers will proceed to target alone. Engage defenses, drop ordnance, RTB on reciprocal heading." The pointer stopped at checkpoint Delta. Still 80 miles from friendly territory. 80 miles the bombers would fly alone. "Expected losses?" someone asked. Hendricks didn't flinch. 10 to 15%. 10 to 15%. 6 to 9 aircraft, 60 to 90 men. The mathematics of attrition. Numbers on a chart. Acceptable losses in pursuit of strategic objectives. Garrison looked at the map. The distances, the fuel calculations, the timing windows, everything had to work perfectly. Weather, navigation, enemy response. If one variable changed, the entire mission could collapse. "Weather," another pilot asked. Cloud cover at 8,000 feet, clear above. Temperatures at altitude -45 Celsius. Visibility 15 miles. Winds west-southwest at 40 knots. -45 Celsius. Cold enough to freeze gun mechanisms. Cold enough to kill if a pilot had to bail out. Cold enough to make every breath painful. Questions? Nobody spoke. What was there to ask? The mission was what it was. They would fly. They would fight. Some would come home. Some wouldn't. Questions didn't change the mathematics. Dismissed. Take off at 0945. The room emptied slowly. Men moving like they were underwater, the weight of knowledge pressing down. 60 bomber crews, 600 men, 10 to 15% losses. The numbers everyone was thinking about, but nobody said aloud.
Garrison stood. Blackwood appeared beside him. You heard him, Blackwood said. RTB at Delta, no exceptions. Garrison nodded, said nothing. Ghost, I mean it. I heard him, Eagle. I was in the room. Blackwood grabbed his arm. Don't make me watch you die for nothing. Garrison looked at his friend, really looked at him, saw the exhaustion, the fear poorly hidden, the accumulated weight of 47 missions and friends who weren't coming back. It won't be for nothing, Garrison said quietly. Promise me you'll turn back. I can't promise that. Then promise me you'll think about your mother, about the ranch, about having a life after this. Garrison pulled his arm free, gently. I think about it every day. He walked out before Blackwood could respond. January 11th, 1944. 0630 hours. Final preparations. The sky was still dark, stars visible through broken clouds. The airfield was alive with activity, ground crews swarming over aircraft, fuel trucks, ammunition carts, the organized chaos of men preparing for war. Garrison walked to his Mustang alone. He always did this part alone. Some men prayed, some wrote letters they wouldn't mail, some talked to photographs of loved ones. Garrison walked, let his mind settle, let the fear compress into something useful. Kincaid was waiting by the aircraft. He handed Garrison a thermos, coffee, still hot. Thought you might want this. Garrison took it, drank. The coffee was terrible, bitter, overbrewed, perfect. Thanks. I did one more check on gun number 3, Kincaid said. Honestly, I think it'll hold, but if you start feeling vibrations, shut it down. Don't push it. Understood. Kincaid hesitated, then pulled an envelope from his jacket. I don't usually do this. But if something happens, if you don't come back, make sure someone sends this to my sister. Garrison took the envelope. It was sealed, addressed, stamped, ready to mail. You're not dying today, Luther. I'm not flying today. You are. And I've been doing this long enough to know that sometimes good men don't come home. Garrison slipped the envelope into his flight jacket. I'll bring it back myself. You can mail it in person. Kincaid smiled. I'll hold you to that. 9:45 hours. Engine start. The Packard Merlin coughed once, twice, then roared to life. 1,290 horsepower turning metal into music. The aircraft trembled, eager, ready. Garrison ran through the checklist. Fuel pressure, oil pressure, hydraulics, electrical, every gauge, every indicator, every system that had to work perfectly or men died. Everything was green. He looked down at his instrument panel, at the gauges that would tell his story today. Fuel, ammunition, airspeed, altitude, simple measurements, life or death reduced to numbers on dials. The radio crackled. Blue Flight, this is Tower. Clear for taxi. 12 Mustangs began to move. Silver aircraft rolling through pre-dawn darkness, wingtip lights glowing, navigation lights painting the tarmac red and green. Garrison fell into position. Blue 4, the last aircraft in the formation, the tail end Charlie, the position most likely to die if enemy fighters attacked from behind. He'd requested it specifically. At the end of the runway, the lead aircraft paused, ran up engines,
checked magnetos, final preparations before committing to flight. Then the first Mustang accelerated, gathering speed, faster, faster, nose lifting, wheels leaving ground, climbing into darkness that was just beginning to fade toward dawn. One by one, the fighters took off. One by one, they climbed, banking west, forming up, becoming a cohesive unit instead of 12 individual aircraft. Garrison was last. He pushed the throttle forward, felt the acceleration press him back into his seat, watched the runway lights blur past, airspeed increasing, 50 knots, 70, 90. At 110 knots, he pulled back on the stick. The Mustang lifted smoothly, gracefully, leaving Earth behind. Below, the airfield shrank. Above, stars were fading. And ahead, somewhere in the darkness, 60 B-17s were forming up. 600 men climbing toward an altitude where cold could kill, where oxygen was thin, where German fighters waited. Garrison climbed to meet them, 0715 hours. Over the English Channel. The bomber formation was massive, 64-engine aircraft in tight elements, stacked at different altitudes. A flying fortress indeed. But fortresses could be breached, and everyone in the sky knew it. The Mustangs took position, high cover, low cover, flanking, a defensive screen meant to intercept enemy fighters before they reached the bombers. Garrison flew at 24,000 feet, high enough to dive on attackers, low enough to see the formation he was protecting. Below him, the bombers looked small, fragile, aluminium shells filled with men and bombs and hope. The Channel passed beneath them, dark water, white caps. England fell away behind. The French coast appeared ahead. This was enemy territory now. Every mile deeper into Europe reduced their margin for error, reduced their fuel reserves, increased the likelihood they'd meet German fighters. The radio stayed mostly silent, brief transmissions, course corrections, navigation checks, professional, calm. The kind of calm that came from men who'd done this before, who knew that panic killed faster than bullets. At 0830 hours they crossed the German border. The landscape below changed. Industrial cities, rail lines, roads, infrastructure, targets, strategic objectives. Also homes, people, lives lived in the shadow of war. Garrison pushed the thought away. Focus on the mission. Focus on the mathematics. Fuel, time, distance, ammunition. The variables that determined who lived and who died. 1,045 hours. Approaching checkpoint Delta. The mission had been clean so far. Too clean. No enemy fighters, no flak, just steady progress deeper into Germany. The kind of calm that made experienced pilots nervous. Garrison's tanks held 58%, 192 gallons. At current consumption, 29 minutes of flight time, maybe 32 if he leaned the mixture dangerously thin. The bombers were 15 miles ahead of their planned position. Good navigation, good flying, but it created a problem. If the escorts turned back at checkpoint Delta as ordered, the bombers would be alone for 17 extra minutes. 17 minutes without fighter cover. 17 minutes when German interceptors could attack without interference. Blue flight, this is blue lead. The squadron commander's voice was steady. Checkpoint Delta in 2 minutes. Prepare to RTB on my mark. Garrison didn't respond. He was doing mathematics. Bombers needed 32 minutes to reach Allied fighter cover. His fuel lasted 29 minutes. 3-minute gap. Physics had spoken. But the German fighters would attack in the first 5 minutes after the escorts left. Maximum vulnerability, maximum opportunity. If someone could hold them off for just those 5 minutes, disrupt their attack patterns, force them to react instead of execute planned attacks. 5 minutes wouldn't get the bombers home, but it might get them close enough that the next wave of Allied fighters could reach them, might reduce casualties, might save some of those 600 men. Might. Blue flight, RTB, repeat, return to base, acknowledge by element. Blue 1, copy. Blue 2, copy. Blue 3, copy. Garrison's turn. He pressed the transmit button. Blue 4, copy. 11 Mustangs banked west, silver aircraft turning toward home, toward England, toward fuel that would last the journey. Garrison held his course,
Pushed the throttle forward slightly, closed the distance to the bomber formation.
Blue 4, this is Blue Lead. You are not RTB. Acknowledge. Garrison reached down, switched off his radio. The sudden silence was absolute. No voices, no orders, just the roar of his engine and the whistle of wind past the canopy. Ahead, the German fighters appeared, dark shapes against pale clouds, not a chaotic swarm, disciplined formations, veterans who knew their business. 26 Bf-109s, maybe more behind them, against one P-51. Garrison checked his guns, charged all 6, felt the mechanical clunk as rounds chambered. 1,880 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition, 25 seconds of continuous fire. Then he looked down at the bombers. 60 aircraft, 600 men. Clayton Vaughan in the lead ship, Desmond Holloway in a ball turret, Raphael Stern plotting navigation. Men who'd trusted him, men he'd promised to protect. The numbers refused to work.
The fuel wouldn't stretch. The orders said turn back. But Nathaniel Garrison had made a promise, and some promises mattered more than survival. He pushed the throttle to maximum power. The Mustang surged forward, faster, climbing toward the German formation. 1 aircraft against 26, 1 man against impossible odds. The equation had no solution, but Nathaniel Garrison had given his word, and that, in the end, was all the mathematics he needed. 11:17 a.m., 24,000 feet. The German formation hung in the sky like a predator circling prey. 26 Messerschmitt Bf-109s arranged in precise schwarms. 4 plane elements stacked at different altitudes. The kind of tactical arrangement that took years to perfect. The kind that killed Allied bombers by the dozens. Garrison counted them quickly, committed the formation to memory. Lead group high and to the north. Second group spreading wide to flank. 10 aircraft maintaining top cover. 16 moving into attack position against the bombers. They hadn't seen him yet. 1 lone Mustang approaching from their 6 o'clock, from below, from the sun. He had perhaps 30 seconds of surprise, maybe less. Then it would become a fight. And fights at this altitude were decided by small margins, fractions of seconds, degrees of angle, ounces of pressure on a trigger. The lead Bf-109 carried distinctive markings, black and white checkered cowling, the personal insignia of a Staffel leader. Garrison knew what that meant. This wasn't a green pilot. This was a veteran, someone who'd survived years of combat, someone who'd killed before, someone who would kill today if Garrison didn't stop him. He pushed the stick forward. The Mustang's nose dropped. Airspeed began to build. 400 miles per hour, 420, 440. The aircraft trembled as it approached its design limits. Metal and rivets and wings stressed beyond normal parameters. Below him, the bomber formation droned on, unaware. 600 men who didn't know that their fighter escort had abandoned them, who didn't know that 1 pilot had stayed behind, who didn't know they were seconds from being attacked by some of the most experienced fighter pilots in the Luftwaffe. Range to target, 800 yards, 700, 600. Garrison's right hand moved to the gun trigger. His left stayed on the throttle, maximum power. The Packard Merlin engine screamed. Fuel consumption spiked. Every second of this dive cost him precious range, precious minutes he'd need later. But later didn't matter if the bombers died now. 400 yards, 300. The lead German pilot must have sensed something, must have felt that pressure between his shoulder blades that combat pilots learned to trust. He started to turn, started to look back. Too slow. Garrison squeezed the trigger. All 6 50 caliber machine guns fired simultaneously. The aircraft shuddered. Tracers arced across the sky, bright lines connecting his aircraft to the enemy. Mathematics made visible, ballistics transformed into light and death. The rounds converged on the lead Bf-109 at a combined rate of 4,500 rounds per minute. That was 75 rounds per second. In the 2.8 seconds Garrison held the trigger, 168 rounds hammered into the German fighter.
The BF-109's engine cowling disintegrated, metal shredded, oil lines severed, coolant sprayed. The propeller fragmented, pieces spinning away into the sky like shrapnel. The wing root caught fire. Not a small fire, a massive conflagration fed by ruptured fuel lines and hydraulic fluid and the pure oxygen-rich air at 24,000 feet. Garrison saw the pilot, Hauptmann Victor Adler. The man yanked back his canopy, stood up in the cockpit, jumped. His parachute opened at 11:17 and 14 seconds. The BF-109 tumbled, spinning, burning, already dead. Garrison pulled back hard on the stick. 7 Gs of force crushed him into his seat. His vision tunneled, black crept in from the edges. He eased off slightly, just enough to stay conscious, just enough to fight. The Mustang climbed back toward altitude, energy management, speed traded for height that would let him dive again, attack again. His ammunition counter clicked down. 1,712 rounds remaining, 168 rounds to kill 1 aircraft. That was the mathematics. At that rate, he could kill 10 more, maybe 11 if he was precise. But there were 25 enemies left, and more coming. The radio crackled with German voices, frantic, confused. He didn't speak German, but he understood the tone. Surprise, anger, fear. They'd expected the escorts to be gone. They'd expected an easy run against defenseless bombers. Instead, one of their leaders was floating down on a parachute, and his aircraft was falling in pieces. Garrison leveled off at 26,000 feet, scanned the sky, found his next target. A swarm was breaking from the main formation. 4 BF-109s diving toward the bombers. Attack run already committed. 2 focused on their target to watch their 6. He rolled inverted, pulled through. The world spun. Sky became ground. Ground became sky. Then he was diving again. Airspeed building. The Mustang's engine note changed. Higher, more urgent. The sound of a machine being pushed to its limits. The second German fighter never knew what hit him. Garrison fired from 300 yards. A 2-second burst, 150 rounds. The BF-109's tail section separated. Control surfaces gone. The aircraft pitched violently nose down and began to spin. Unrecoverable. No parachute. The pilot went down with his aircraft. 11:19 a.m. 2 kills in 2 minutes. 24 enemies remaining. Fuel gauge, 56%, already lower than it should be. The high-power climbs and dives were burning fuel at almost twice the normal rate. His careful calculations were becoming obsolete, the numbers changing in real time. He climbed again, trading speed for altitude, looking for the next threat, and found it. 8 BF-109s were forming up, not attacking the bombers, turning toward him. They'd identified the threat. Now they were coming to eliminate it. This was different. These pilots weren't focused on bomber attacks. They were focused on him. 8 veteran fighters with one objective: kill the lone Mustang. The leader waggled his wings. Hand signals flashed in cockpits. They were coordinating, planning. These weren't panicked responses. This was tactical execution. Garrison did quick mathematics, 8 against 1. If they executed a proper defensive circle, he couldn't attack without exposing himself. If they split into elements, they could trap him between multiple threats. If they were patient, they could force him to burn fuel maneuvering until his engine quit. They had numbers, they had experience, they had time. He had altitude and speed and desperation. The lead German fighter pitched up, climbing to meet him. The classic fighter maneuver: gain altitude advantage, dictate the engagement terms. Garrison waited. Let him climb. Let him burn energy and airspeed, climbing toward a target that wasn't going to be there. At the last moment, Garrison rolled hard left. The Mustang snapped through 90 degrees of bank in less than a second. He pulled through. 5 Gs, 6. His vision grayed. He held it. The BF-109 overshot. Too much energy, too committed to the attack. Garrison reversed, pulled the nose around. The enemy fighter was now below him, in front of him. Perfect deflection shot. He fired. 1.2 seconds, 90 rounds. The BF-109's cockpit shattered. Canopy glass exploded.
The aircraft rolled, inverted, and dove. Still under control. The pilot was still alive, still fighting, but Garrison didn't have time to finish him. The other 7 fighters were converging. He could see tracers arcing past his canopy, bright lines of light that meant death if they connected. He pushed the nose down, dove, used the Mustang's superior speed to extend away, put distance between himself and the threat. At 18,000 feet he pulled out, checked his 6. Clear. For now. But his right outboard gun had stopped firing. He could feel it. Different vibration pattern. The gun Kincaid had warned him about. 500 rounds, the crew chief had said. Don't push it past 500 rounds. Garrison looked at his ammunition counter. 1,550 rounds remaining. 330 rounds fired. Gun number 3 had lasted longer than predicted, but now it was gone. 5 guns left. Still enough to kill. Still enough to fight. 11:21 a.m. He climbed back toward the bomber formation. Below him, the B-17s maintained their steady course. Solid, professional, men doing their jobs while death circled overhead. Inside one of those aircraft, Clayton Vaughn gripped his control yoke and wondered if the lone Mustang he'd glimpsed was real or imagined. Inside another, Desmond Holloway rotated his ball turret, tracking targets, watching the impossible unfold. And somewhere in that formation, Raphael Stern plotted their course home and calculated survival percentages that kept getting smaller. The German fighters regrouped. Garrison counted them. 23 active, 2 destroyed, 1 damaged. Not enough. Not nearly enough. And then his day got worse. New radar contacts. 9 more Bf-109s approaching from the northeast. Reinforcements from JG-26's second group. Fresh aircraft, full ammunition, full fuel. The radio crackled. German, but one word he understood. Verstärkung. Reinforcements. He counted the new dots on the horizon. 9 more fighters joining the battle. 32 enemy fighters now. Against one Mustang that was already damaged, already burning fuel faster than sustainable, already down to 5 guns. His day had just gotten mathematically worse. Fuel gauge, 52%, 172 gallons. The leak from the patched tank was getting worse. He could see fuel vapor streaming from the right wing. Not a catastrophic leak, but steady, relentless. Every minute reduced his remaining flight time. New calculation. At current leak rate plus combat power consumption, he had approximately 26 minutes of fuel. The bombers needed 27 minutes to reach Allied fighter cover. 1 minute gap. 1 minute when they'd be defenseless. Assuming he could last 26 minutes against 32 enemy fighters. The German formations split. 18 fighters moved to engage the bombers. 14 fighters turned toward Garrison. They'd learned. They understood now. Kill the Mustang first. Then the bombers were helpless. It was the right tactical decision. It was what Garrison would have done. The 14 fighters arranged themselves in a deadly geometry. High cover, low blockers, pincer elements. Not a chaotic furball, a coordinated kill box. They were going to trap him. Force him into a position where he couldn't escape. Where every direction he turned, guns would be waiting. This was how experienced pilots killed lone fighters. Not through individual skill, through coordination, through patience, through mathematics that didn't care about courage or determination. Garrison looked at the trap forming around him, looked at the bombers below, looked at his fuel gauge ticking down. Then he did the last thing they expected. He attacked, straight into the center of their formation, 440 miles per hour, every gun firing, tracers streaming from his wings like ribbons of light. The German pilots scattered, not because they were cowards, because human instinct overrode tactical training. When something comes at you at 400 miles per hour, with all guns blazing, you move. One Bf-109 didn't move fast enough. Garrison's rounds walked up the fuselage, engine, cockpit, tail. The aircraft came apart in mid-air, pieces tumbling. Another kill. But it cost him. His airspeed bled away in the violent maneuvers. He was slower now, lower. The advantage eroding with every second. And the Germans realized it. They regrouped faster this time, professional, controlled. They'd seen what he could do. Now they were going to counter it.
6 fighters dove on him from above, textbook attack, multiple threats, impossible to defend against all of them. Garrison picked one, the lead aircraft, pulled hard right, let the others overshoot, focused everything on that single target. Head-on pass.
Combined closure rate 680 miles per hour, 1 second to fire, maybe less. Both pilots squeezed their triggers simultaneously. Garrison's rounds hit first, 50 caliber API, armor-piercing incendiary. The BF-109's propeller boss shattered, engine seized, the aircraft's nose pitched down violently. But the German pilot's rounds hit too, cannon fire, 30mm high explosive. 2 rounds impacted Garrison's right wing. One punched through the aileron, the other hit the fuel tank. The tank was already leaking, now it was hemorrhaging. Fuel sprayed into the slipstream, a mist of high-octane gasoline atomizing at 200 miles per hour. One spark, one tracer, one fragment of hot metal. That's all it would take. Fuel gauge, 50%, 48, 45. Not a slow leak anymore, a hemorrhage. New mathematics. At this rate, 10 minutes of fuel, maybe 12. The bombers needed 24 minutes, 14 minutes gap. The numbers refused to bend. But Garrison had just killed another German fighter, and they were getting cautious now, hanging back, reassessing. He'd bought time, not much, but some. 11:25 a.m. He climbed back toward the bombers. Every foot of altitude cost fuel. Every second of high power burned precious range. But altitude meant energy. Energy meant options. His left outboard gun jammed, frozen solid. The brutal cold at altitude, moisture in the mechanism turning to ice, expanding, seizing metal parts that needed to move freely. 4 guns left now, and his ammunition was dropping faster than his fuel. 1,420 rounds remaining. That was 355 rounds per gun. At optimal firing discipline, maybe 14 seconds of fire time total. 14 seconds to hold off 30 enemy fighters. Garrison checked the bomber formation. Still steady, still professional. Men who trusted their escort to protect them. Men who didn't know their escort was one damaged fighter, piloted by someone who was making up tactics as he went. The German fighters regrouped, 30 aircraft now, 3 destroyed, 2 damaged and retreating, but 30 fresh fighters coordinating. The situation hadn't improved. They split again, this time smarter. 20 fighters formed a wall between Garrison and the bombers. 10 fighters maneuvered to trap him from behind. If he went for the bombers, the rear group would kill him. If he turned to fight the rear group, the forward group would slaughter the B-17s. Classic tactical problem. No good solution, only choices between bad and worse. Garrison chose worse. He dove toward the rear group, committed to engaging them, let the forward group have a free run at the bombers. But he didn't engage. At the last second he pulled through, used the dive speed to zoom climb, shot past the rear group before they could react, came up behind the forward group. They were focused on the bombers, setting up attack runs, perfect targets. Garrison fired. 3-second burst, 225 rounds. 1 BF-109 exploded. Fuel tank hit. The fighter next to it flew through the debris cloud and caught fire. 2 kills, 1 burst. The formation scattered. Attack runs aborted. The bombers were safe. For now. But Garrison was in the worst possible position. Low, slow, surrounded. The German fighters converged on him like sharks sensing blood. 12 aircraft, maybe 15, all firing. Tracers filled the sky. Cannon shells, machine gun rounds. The air itself seemed to be tearing apart. Garrison pulled hard. 9 Gs. His vision went black. He couldn't see, flying blind through sheer feel and instinct. The stick in his hands, the pressure on his body, the sound of his engine. Something hit his tail, hard. Metal screamed. Control surfaces damaged. The Mustang shuddered, tried to roll inverted. He fought it, forced the stick forward. Broke the stall. Dove. At 15,000 feet, his vision cleared. He pulled out, checked his aircraft. Tail damage. Right aileron almost gone. Fuel still pouring from the wing tank. Oil pressure fluctuating. Hydraulic pressure low. And his third gun jammed.
down to 3 functioning weapons now. 1,180 rounds remaining. 393 rounds per gun. Approximately 15 seconds of total fire time. Fuel at 38%. The patched tank completely empty now. Leaking stopped, only because there was nothing left to leak. But the main tanks were draining faster than they should. Something else was damaged. Another leak he couldn't see. He did the mathematics again. Fuel consumption at combat power, 3.5% per minute. Current fuel level, 38%. Divided by 3.5. 10.8 minutes of flight time remaining. The bombers needed 24 minutes to reach safety.
Gap, 13.2 minutes. 13 minutes when 600 men would face 30 German fighters with no protection. Garrison looked at his gauges, at the numbers that told the truth. Chemistry didn't lie. When the fuel ran out, the engine would stop. When the engine stopped, he would fall. No amount of skill or courage or determination could change that. But he could change what happened in the next 10 minutes. He climbed back toward the fight. Engine protesting, aircraft damaged, ammunition low, fuel critical. The German pilots were coordinating now. He could see it in their formations, tighter, more disciplined. They'd taken casualties, lost friends. Now they were angry, focused, determined to kill this one American who wouldn't run, wouldn't quit, wouldn't die. A voice crackled in his headset. Not German, English, heavily accented. Someone had switched to Allied frequencies. American pilot, you fight well, but you are alone. You have no fuel, no ammunition. You will die here, RTB. While you can, live to fight another day. It was the enemy commander, offering terms, offering survival. Garrison looked down at the bombers, 60 aircraft, 600 men. Clayton Vaughan keeping his formation tight. Desmond Holloway rotating his turret, watching the fight above. Raphael Stern plotting courses and calculating odds. Men who trusted him. Men he'd promised to protect. He pressed his transmit button. Negative. That was all he said. One word. But it carried everything. Refusal, defiance, commitment. The German pilot was silent for a moment. Then, so be it. You die with honor. The radio went quiet. Garrison checked his guns, charged the 3 that still worked. 1,180 rounds, 15 seconds. That's all he had left to give. But 15 seconds could be an eternity in combat. 15 seconds could mean the difference between life and death for 600 men. He pushed his throttle forward. The engine coughed, sputtered. The fuel pressure warning light flickered. Then the engine caught, roared, burning the last reserves of fuel in his tanks. Garrison climbed toward the German formation. 1 aircraft against 30. 1 pilot against impossible odds. 1 man who'd made a promise and intended to keep it. The situation was impossible. The fuel wouldn't last. The odds meant nothing to a man who'd given his word. 11:30 a.m. The bombers still flew. The Germans still attacked. And Nathaniel Garrison still fought. Because some promises mattered more than survival. And this was one of them. 11:32 a.m. 18,000 feet. The fuel warning light glowed steady red on Garrison's instrument panel. No longer flickering. Solid. Urgent. The kind of warning that meant minutes, not hours. 3 guns working. 1,180 rounds of ammunition. Fuel that wouldn't last another 15 minutes. The German fighters had reorganized. 29 aircraft still active. They'd learned to respect him. To fear him. But fear and respect didn't mean retreat. It meant they were being smarter, more careful, more lethal. 14 fighters formed a barrier between Garrison and the bombers. The rest circled high, waiting, patient. They didn't need to kill him through aggression. They could kill him through attrition. Let him burn his remaining fuel chasing them. Let physics do what bullets hadn't. It was the right strategy. It was what Garrison would have done. Below, the bomber formation maintained course, solid, professional. Men who'd watched one fighter hold off an entire enemy group for 15 minutes. Men who were starting to believe the impossible might be possible. Garrison checked his math one more time. Fuel, 38%.
Consumption rate with damaged systems, 3.5% per minute. Time remaining, 10.8 minutes. Distance to Allied lines, approximately 72 miles at bomber speed. Time required at 180 miles per hour, 24 minutes. The gap had grown. 13.2 minutes when the bombers would be defenseless, unless he could buy them more time. He looked at his ammunition counter. 1,180 rounds divided by 3 guns. 393 rounds per gun. At optimal conservation, 1 to 2 second bursts, he could make perhaps 8 to 10 effective attacks. 8 attacks against 29 fighters. The equation still had no solution. But mathematics measured what was, not what could be. Garrison pushed the throttle forward. The engine responded. Still strong, still reliable. The Packard Merlin doing what it was designed to do, converting fuel and air into power and motion and the ability to fight. He climbed, trading precious fuel for altitude. Every 1,000 feet cost him seconds of flight time. But altitude meant energy. Energy meant options. At 22,000 feet, he leveled off, scanned the formation below, found his target. 4 BF-109s were breaking from the main group, diving toward the bombers. Attack, run, committed. They thought he was too damaged, too low on fuel, too desperate to interfere. They were wrong. Garrison rolled inverted, pulled through. The world spun. His vision tunneled but held. He'd done this maneuver 1,000 times, muscle memory taking over when conscious thought became too slow. The dive was steep. Airspeed built rapidly. 380 miles per hour, 400, 420. The aircraft shook, metal stressed beyond normal parameters, rivets creaking, wings flexing. At 440 miles per hour, he pulled out of the dive. 7 Gs crushed him into his seat. Blood drained from his head. Grey crept in from the edges of his vision. He eased back slightly, just enough to stay conscious. The 4 German fighters were below him now, focused on their attack, on the bombers, not watching their 6. Range, 400 yards, 300, 200. Garrison fired. 2.3-second burst. 172 rounds from 3 guns. The lead BF-109 staggered. Rounds walked up the fuselage, engine cowling shredded, oil sprayed, the propeller seized. The aircraft nosed down, trailing black smoke. Garrison didn't follow, pulled up immediately, climbed, looking for the next threat. Ammunition, 1,008 rounds remaining. Fuel, 34%. The German formation reacted, not with panic this time, with cold calculation. They split into 3 elements. 1 engaged Garrison directly. 1 continued toward the bombers. 1 positioned to cut off his escape. Textbook tactics. Multiple, simultaneous threats. Force him to choose. Every choice, a compromise. Every compromise, a step closer to death. Garrison chose the element attacking the bombers. Always the bombers. That was the mission. That was the promise. He dove on them. 6 BF-109s in loose formation. They saw him coming, broke formation, scattered, making themselves harder targets, forcing him to commit to one while the others maneuvered for advantage. He picked the leader, always the leader. Kill the man coordinating the attack, and the others became less effective. Head-on pass, combined closure rate, 650 miles per hour. Time to fire, less than 1 second. Both pilots triggered simultaneously. Garrison's rounds hit the BF-109's engine. Cylinders shattered. The aircraft pitched violently upward, out of control. But the Germans' Callan shells hit too. 1 round impacted Garrison's left wing root. High explosive. The wing flexed. Metal tore. Hydraulic lines severed. Warning lights flashed. Hydraulic pressure 0. That meant no flaps. Landing gear would be manual extension only, if he lived long enough to land. Another round hit the fuselage behind the cockpit, punched through aluminium skin, exited through the bottom, missed the fuel tank by inches, missed Garrison by less. He pulled hard right, G-forces compressing his spine, vision narrowing, the world reduced to instrument panel and sky, and the geometric problem of not dying in the next 3 seconds. A BF-109 flashed past his canopy, so close he could see the pilot's face. Young, maybe 22, eyes wide, surprised to still be alive. Not evil, not a monster, Just a pilot, like him. The thought came unbidden, unwanted. He pushed it away. Focus, fight, survive. Garrison reversed, pulled the nose around. The Mustang responded sluggishly, control cables damaged, the aircraft fighting him, wanting to roll inverted, wanting to fall. He fought it, forced it level, climbed. At 19,000 feet, he checked his damage. Left wing trailing fluid, not fuel, hydraulic fluid. Red mist in the slipstream.
The system completely empty now. Right wing still leaking fuel vapor. Engine oil pressure fluctuating. Temperature rising. The Packard Merlin was dying, not catastrophically, slowly, bleeding out from a dozen small wounds. Ammunition, 840 rounds, 2 more kills. But at what cost? Fuel, 29%. 9 minutes remaining, maybe 10. The bombers needed 21 minutes, 11-minute gap, growing with every second he burned fuel in combat. Garrison looked at his gauges, at the truth written in dials and needles and warning lights. The situation had become impossible. Not difficult, not challenging, impossible. He couldn't reach Allied lines with his remaining fuel, even if he disengaged now, even if he ran. The German commander's voice crackled in his headset again. "American, your aircraft is destroyed. Your fuel is gone. You have fought with honor. Disengage, bail out, live." The voice wasn't mocking. It was almost respectful. One warrior to another, offering terms that preserved dignity. Garrison looked down at the bombers, at 60 B-17s carrying 600 men, at Clayton Vaughan in the lead ship who'd asked for protection, at Desmond Holloway who'd named his unborn child, at Raphael Stern who'd lost everyone except the men flying beside him. He pressed the transmit button. Not yet. Then he turned his radio off. Completely off. No more voices, no more offers, no more distractions. Just him and his aircraft and the mission that remained. 11:38 a.m. The German fighters regrouped, 27 still active, 2 destroyed in the last exchange, but they were learning, adapting, each attack more coordinated than the last. They came at him in waves, not all at once, sequential attacks designed to force him to maneuver continuously, burn fuel, burn ammunition, burn time. Garrison met the first wave head-on, fired a 3-second burst, 225 rounds. One BF-109 caught fire, fell away, burning. Ammunition, 615 rounds remaining. The second wave came from above. Garrison pulled vertical, climbed to meet them, engine screaming, airspeed bleeding away. At the apex of the climb he hung on his propeller, stalled, fell away. 2 German fighters followed him up, also stalled, all 3 aircraft falling together, tumbling, out of control. Garrison recovered first, pushed the nose down, built airspeed. The Germans recovered a second later. 1 second. Enough. He fired. 1.8-second burst. 135 rounds. The nearest BF-109 disintegrated. Wing separated. Fuselage broke in half. Catastrophic structural failure. Ammunition, 480 rounds. Fuel, 23%. The third wave approached from below. Garrison dove on them, used gravity to build speed without burning extra fuel. 400 miles per hour, 420, 440. He fired a 2-second burst at the lead fighter. 150 rounds. The BF-109's tail section came apart. The aircraft pitched into an unrecoverable spin. Ammunition, 330 rounds remaining. That was it. The mathematics had caught up. 330 rounds divided by 3 guns. 110 rounds per gun. At 750 rounds per minute, that was 8.8 seconds of total fire time. Less than 9 seconds of ammunition, against 24 enemy fighters. Garrison pulled out of the dive, climbed slowly, conserving fuel, watching the German formation regroup. They knew. They could see his attacks becoming shorter, more conservative. They understood he was running out of ammunition, running out of time, running out of options. 11:42 a.m. Fuel, 18%. 6 minutes remaining.
The bombers needed 18 minutes to reach safety, 12-minute gap. Physics had spoken its final word. But Garrison had one asset remaining.
One thing the Germans couldn't calculate, couldn't predict, couldn't counter with tactics or numbers or coordination. They didn't know he was out of options. They assumed he still had ammunition, still had fuel, still had the ability to fight. And fear of what a man might do was sometimes more powerful than what he actually could do. Garrison selected his next target. Not the fighters attacking the bombers, not the elements maneuvering against him, the formation leaders, the aircraft coordinating the attacks. He dove on a Bf-109 with distinctive markings, white spiral on the spinner, unit commander, the man directing the battle. Range, 300 yards, 200, 100. Garrison fired. 1.2-second burst, 90 rounds, all 3 guns, maximum concentration. The Bf-109 exploded, direct hit on the fuel tank, fireball visible for miles. Ammunition, 240 rounds remaining. The German formation wavered. Their commander was dead. Void, a nation broken. They were still dangerous, still numerous, but leaderless. Garrison climbed away, engine coughing now, fuel pressure dropping, temperature climbing, the Packard Merlin entering its final minutes of operation. He checked the bombers, still flying, still holding formation, 17 minutes from Allied lines. He had fuel for maybe 5 minutes, 12-minute gap. But something had changed. The German attacks had slowed, become less coordinated. The loss of their commander had disrupted their rhythm. Garrison selected another target. Not a fighter, a coordinator, an aircraft directing others. He dove, fired a 2-second burst, 150 rounds. The target aircraft staggered, damaged, fell out of formation. Ammunition, 90 rounds remaining. Fuel, 14%. That was it. 90 rounds, 3 guns, 30 rounds per gun, 3.6 seconds of fire. The German fighters regrouped. 22 aircraft still active, but confused, cautious. They'd lost their commander and 2 coordinators. Their attacks were individual now, uncoordinated, less effective. Garrison's engine coughed, sputtered. The fuel pressure warning light went solid red. He switched tanks, drew from the last reserve. Maybe 2 minutes of fuel, maybe 3. He climbed toward the German formation, not to attack, just to position, to threaten, to make them think he still had ammunition, still had capability. A Bf-109 dove on him. Attack run committed. Garrison turned toward it, pointed his nose, prepared to fire. The German pilot saw the Mustang's nose come around, saw the gun ports, assumed they were loaded, broke off the attack, pulled away. Garrison hadn't fired, hadn't needed to. The bluff worked. Another fighter approached. Garrison turned to engage. The enemy pilot broke away. Defensive. They didn't know, couldn't know. His guns might be empty, or they might be full. Their only way to find out was to press an attack. And nobody wanted to be the one who found out by dying.
11:48 a.m. Fuel, 9%. 2 minutes remaining, maybe less. The bombers were 15 minutes from safety. Garrison's engine was dying. He could feel it. Vibration changing, power dropping, temperature climbing past redline. The Packard Merlin had given everything it had. Now it was giving more, running on fumes and determination and engineering that exceeded its design specifications. Bf-109 made a committed attack run, no hesitation. The pilot had decided to risk it. Garrison turned into him, lined up, put his finger on the trigger, and squeezed. Click. Nothing. The guns were empty. All 90 rounds fired in the last burst he'd forgotten to count. The ammunition counter read 0. The German pilot pressed his attack, firing, cannon shells and machine gun rounds tearing through the air. Garrison pulled hard, 9 Gs. His vision went black, flying blind, pure instinct. The Germans' tracers missed.
Barely. Close enough that he heard them crack past his canopy. He reversed, pulled around, dove straight at the German fighter. No guns, no ammunition, just speed and nerve and the absolute commitment to not brake first. The range closed. 300 yards, 200, 100. The German pilot's nerve broke. He pulled away. Hard turn, desperate. Garrison followed, stayed on him. Gun ports silent, but the threat implicit. The Bf-109 fled, full throttle, running. Garrison broke off, didn't chase, couldn't chase. His engine was seconds from failure. But the other German fighters had seen it, seen one of their own run from an American fighter that might or might not have ammunition, that might or might not still be dangerous. They hesitated. 11:50 a.m., Garrison's engine coughed, sputtered. The propeller windmilled once, twice, then stopped. Dead silence. No engine roar, no mechanical vibration, just wind, just the whistle of air past the canopy. He was gliding now, from 22,000 feet. Glide ratio 12:1. That meant he could cover approximately 50 miles before hitting the ground. The bombers were 48 miles from Allied lines. The mathematics finally aligned. Barely, impossibly, but aligned. Garrison trimmed the aircraft for best glide speed, 140 miles per hour. Maximum efficiency, trading altitude for distance at the optimal rate. Below him, the German fighters circled, watching, waiting. They could see he wasn't maneuvering anymore, couldn't maneuver. They understood. His fuel was gone, his engine dead. But they didn't attack, maybe out of respect, maybe out of uncertainty, maybe because 60 P-47 Thunderbolts were appearing on the horizon. Allied reinforcements, finally. The German formation turned east, breaking off, retreating. The bombers were safe now, protected by fresh fighters with full ammunition and full fuel. Garrison glided west, silent, alone. Altitude bleeding away with each mile. 18,000 feet, 15,000, 12,000. He could see England now, distant, hazy, home. At 8,000 feet, he crossed Allied lines. British anti-aircraft crews tracked him, recognized the silhouette, didn't fire. At 5,000 feet, he spotted an airfield, RAF Manston, emergency landing strip on the coast. At 3,000 feet, he tried to extend his landing gear. Manual extension, pumped the handle, nothing. Hydraulic failure. The gear was stuck up. Belly landing, no choice. He aimed for the grass beside the runway, didn't want to block the concrete in case the bombers needed it. At 500 feet, he keyed his radio. Still off. He turned it on. Manston Tower, this is American P-51. Emergency landing. No gear, no power. The tower responded immediately. P-51, cleared to land any runway. Emergency crews standing by. Garrison lined up on the grass. Airspeed 110 miles per hour. Nose slightly high, trying to bleed off speed without stalling. At 50 feet, he pulled the nose up, flared, let the airspeed decay. The Mustang's belly touched grass at 90 miles per hour. Metal screamed. The aircraft slid, dirt and grass and mud spraying. 1,200 feet, 1,000, 800. The left wing dipped, caught ground. The aircraft spun, once, twice, then stopped. 80 feet from a tree line, facing backward, nose crumpled, wings bent, tail damaged, but down, alive. Garrison sat in the cockpit, hands shaking, not from fear, from exhaustion, from adrenaline crash, from 37 minutes of continuous combat at the limits of physics and capability and endurance. The canopy was jammed. He pushed. It didn't move. Pushed harder. Nothing. Through the shattered windscreen, he saw emergency crews running toward him. Fire trucks, ambulances, men with crowbars and determination. They pried the canopy open. Hands reached in, pulled him out. His legs buckled. He nearly fell. Strong hands caught him. Someone wrapped a blanket around his shoulders. Someone else offered water. He drank. Tasted metal and blood. He'd bitten his tongue at some point. Didn't remember when. A medical officer appeared. "Can you walk?" Garrison nodded. "Any injuries?" "No." His voice was hoarse. Throat raw from breathing pure oxygen for hours. "Can you tell me what happened?" Garrison looked at the man. Tried to form words. Failed. What had happened?
How did you explain 37 minutes that defied every tactical manual and probability calculation ever written? I stayed with the bombers, he said finally. The medical officer waited for more. There wasn't more. That was the story. Simple, complete. They guided him to an ambulance. He sat on the bumper, refused to lie down. He wasn't injured, just exhausted, depleted, empty. A jeep approached. An intelligence officer stepped out. Captain's rank, clipboard in hand. The paperwork of war. Captain Garrison? Yes. I need your after-action report. How many enemy aircraft engaged? Garrison thought. Started with 26. More joined. Maybe 35 total. The intelligence officer wrote. How long were you engaged? 11:17 to 11:54. 37 minutes. More writing. How many enemy aircraft destroyed? Garrison shrugged. 3 confirmed, maybe 4. It happened fast. The intelligence officer looked up. Captain, we have reports from the bomber crews. They're estimating significantly higher numbers. I didn't count. I was busy. They're saying 11 destroyed, 4 more damaged. Is that possible? Garrison closed his eyes, thought back. The diving attacks, the head-on passes, the desperate maneuvering, muzzle flashes and tracers and aircraft falling, young faces in cockpits, men who looked like him. It was a blur, a chaotic memory that didn't fit into neat numbers. Maybe, he said. I don't know. And you did this alone? No wingman? No support? Yes. The intelligence officer stopped writing, just looked at him. That's not possible. Garrison opened his eyes. I was there. It happened. Possible or not. Behind them, engines rumbled. Heavy engines. Radial engines. The sound of B-17s. Garrison stood, walked toward the runway. The intelligence officer followed. 60 B-17s were landing, one after another, damaged, scarred, some with engines feathered, some with obvious battle damage, but all of them flying, all of them landing, all of them bringing their crews home. 600 men stepping off 60 aircraft, alive, because one pilot had stayed when everyone else left. The third bomber to land was Ironclad, Clayton Vaughan's ship. It taxied to a hardstand, engines shut down, the crew climbed out. Vaughan saw Garrison, walked over. His flight suit was torn, oil-stained, exhausted, but he was smiling. He stopped in front of Garrison, saluted, sharp, precise. The kind of salute reserved for something beyond rank, beyond duty. Garrison returned it. You kept your word, Vaughan said. Yes. All 60 ships, all 600 men, not one lost. Garrison nodded, couldn't speak. The weight of it, men who owed their lives to one pilot who wouldn't quit. The intelligence officer appeared beside Garrison. Captain, we've analyzed gun camera footage from multiple bombers. Confirmed kills, 11 enemy aircraft destroyed, 4 damaged, 37 minutes continuous combat, solo engagement against 36 enemy fighters. Garrison said nothing. Sir, the intelligence officer continued, this is beyond exceptional. This is beyond anything in our records. I need to report this up the chain. This deserves recognition. Garrison turned to him. The recognition is standing behind you. 600 men. That's all the recognition I need. But the machinery of military bureaucracy had already begun turning, and some acts of valor couldn't be ignored. March 2nd, 1944. RAF Station Debden. 6 weeks later. The formation was ceremonial. Dress uniforms, polished brass, officers standing at attention in neat rows, a podium draped with American and British flags. Garrison stood at the center of it all, uncomfortable, wishing he was anywhere else. A general he'd never met read from a citation, words like extraordinary heroism and above and beyond the call of duty and complete disregard for his own safety. Then the Medal of Honor was placed around his neck. The weight of it felt wrong, too heavy, too much. When asked to speak, Garrison kept it brief. I just did what needed to be done. The real heroes are the men who fly those bombers every day, the men who don't come home. I was just lucky. The assembled officers applauded. But Garrison saw their faces. They didn't understand, couldn't understand. They saw glory. He saw the faces of German pilots falling, young men who'd never grow old. After the ceremony, doctrine changed. New protocols, aggressive escort tactics, fighters authorized to pursue attackers beyond previous limits. The Garrison Protocol, some called it, though he never used that term. In the 3 months following January 11th, bomber losses dropped 34%. Hundreds of men who would have died came home instead. But Garrison never talked about that day again. Garrison flew 89 more missions. Total, 136. 9 additional confirmed kills. Total, 20. He never mentioned January 11th, 1944. When asked, he changed the subject. His logbook for that date, blank. No entry. Just empty space where the worst and best day of his life should have been recorded. In his personal journal, kept locked in his footlocker, one line. I see their faces, the German pilots, young men, somebody's sons. They weren't evil, just doing their duty. Like me. War makes us all killers. Some of us just survive it. May 8th, 1945. Victory in Europe. Garrison returned to Montana, to the ranch his father had built, to open skies without tracers, to silence without engine roar. Publishers offered book deals. He declined. Studios wanted his story. He said no. Reporters came to the ranch. He sent them away. One journalist persisted, asked why he wouldn't share his story. Because it's not a story, Garrison said. It's 600 men who got to live. That's not entertainment. That's sacred. He never flew again. Not recreationally, not at air shows. When friends asked why, he said the simple truth. I used up all my luck in 37 minutes. Don't want to test if there's any left. He worked the ranch, raised cattle, lived quiet, alone, content. In 1952, a priest heard his confession. Garrison spoke for the first time about the weight he carried, the faces he saw, the names he didn't know. They were soldiers too, Father. Good men on the wrong side. I killed them to save my friends. Was I right? Was I wrong? I don't know anymore. The priest had no answers. Some questions don't have them. October 14th, 1989. National Museum of the Air Force, Dayton, Ohio. Nathaniel Garrison stood before his P-51 Mustang, 74 years old now, grey hair, lined face, but still standing straight, still strong. The aircraft had been restored, silver paint gleaming, tail number 427851 visible, the nickname Silver Phantom painted on the nose. Around him, 147 people gathered. 37 were original crewmen from the 60 B-17s he'd protected. The rest were their children and grandchildren. Clayton Vaughan was there, 80 years old, retired, grandfather of 6. Desmond Holloway was there, 64 years old. His wife Sarah had passed 2 years prior, but his son stood beside him, named Daniel, after Garrison. Raphael Stern's grandson was there, a rabbi now, carrying the memory of family lost and family saved. One by one they approached Garrison, shook his hand, told their stories. My father lived to walk me down the aisle because of you. My grandfather saw his grandchildren born because of you. Our family exists because of you. A researcher presented statistics. 600 men saved. 45 years later, 4,873 living descendants. Among them, 2 NASA astronauts, 14 PhDs, 183 military veterans, 2,347 grandchildren. An entire generation that wouldn't exist except for 37 minutes on January 11th, 1944. Garrison stood silent, overwhelmed. He'd known intellectually that his actions had consequences, but seeing them, touching them, hearing their voices, the weight of it was crushing and beautiful simultaneously. An elderly German approached, formal, dignified. He introduced himself in accented English. Captain Garrison, I am Ernst Schaefer. Oberleutnant JG-26, retired. The name meant nothing to Garrison, but the unit did. "You were there," Garrison said. "Yes. I fired on you. You evaded. I thought you were inhuman, invincible. Only later did I learn you were just a man, like me." Schaefer extended his hand. "We were enemies, but you fought with honor. I wanted to tell you that." Garrison shook his hand. Two old pilots, warriors from opposite sides, both survivors, both carrying weight. "You were good pilots," Garrison said quietly. "It wasn't personal." "War never is," Schaefer replied. "Until it's over, then it becomes very personal indeed." They spoke for 20 minutes, about tactics, about aircraft, about the men they'd lost, not as enemies, as fellow travelers through the same hell. When Schaefer left, Garrison felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not absolution, but understand. The museum director asked Garrison to speak. Reluctantly, he agreed. "I didn't do anything special," he began. "I just stayed, that's all. I promised Captain Vaughan I'd be there, and I was." He paused, looked at the crowd, at faces young and old, at lives that existed because of a promise kept. January 11th, 1944. I was 29 years old. I had 1 aircraft, 6 guns, enough fuel for 29 minutes. The bombers needed 32. The mathematics didn't work, but mathematics can't measure everything. His voice grew quieter. It can't measure duty, or loyalty, or love for the men beside you. It can't calculate what a promise is worth, or what 600 lives mean. He looked at his Mustang, battle-scarred, restored, beautiful. The others joined. Standing ovation. 147 people applauding one old pilot who'd kept his word 45 years ago. Garrison stood, awkward, uncomfortable with praise, with attention, with being called a hero, because he'd never felt like one. He'd felt like a pilot who'd run out of options and refused to quit. Sometimes that's what heroism is. December 3rd, 1995. Garrison Ranch, Montana. Nathaniel Garrison died peacefully in his sleep, 80 years old, surrounded by friends. The ranch he loved visible through his bedroom window. His funeral was small, simple, as he'd requested. "No flyover," his will stated. "I was just a pilot. Let me rest as one." But 4,873 people sent letters, cards, flowers, families who existed because one man had stayed when everyone else left. He was buried with his Medal of Honor and a photograph, 60 B-17s in formation. January 11th, 1944. On his headstone, one line, "I'll be there. You have my word." Present day, United States Air Force Academy, Colorado Springs. A young pilot sits in a classroom, learning fighter tactics, studying aerial combat, preparing for a war that might never come. The instructor pulls up a case study. January 11th, 1944, Captain Nathaniel Garrison, 1 P-51 Mustang versus 35 enemy fighters, 37 minutes. All 60 bombers returned safely. The instructor pauses. This is not a tactical manual. This is a lesson in commitment, in doing the impossible because the alternative is unacceptable. The young pilot studies the numbers, the fuel calculations, the ammunition counts, the mathematics that didn't work. "How?" she asks. The instructor smiles. He gave his word. And to men like Garrison, a promise was more important than survival. The class ends. The students leave. But the lesson remains. In every fighter cockpit, every mission brief, every moment when a pilot has to choose between safe and right. The Garrison Protocol. Not written in manuals, not taught in classrooms, but understood by every pilot who's ever flown in defense of those who can't defend themselves. Never abandon those in your care. Stay when others leave. Keep your word, no matter the cost. On a wall in the National Museum of the Air Force, beneath a restored P-51 Mustang, a plaque reads, "Captain Nathaniel Ghost Garrison, 1915 to 1995, 136 combat missions, 20 confirmed aerial victories, Medal of Honor recipient. January 11, 1944, 1 pilot, 1 aircraft, 37 minutes, 600 men saved, 4,873 descendants living today. The mathematics said it was impossible. The fuel said he would die. The orders said turn back. But Nathaniel Garrison had given his word, and sometimes that's all the mathematics you need.
The end. But not really, because every time a pilot chooses duty over survival, every time someone keeps a promise when it costs everything, every time one person stands between the innocent and the threat, Nathaniel Garrison's legacy lives on. Not in medals, not in museums, not in plaques, but in the simple truth that one person, in the right place, at the right moment, refusing to quit, can change everything. January 11, 1944, 37 minutes, one decision, forever.